Yo, what's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Formula Podcast with me, your host, Trevor Carlson. On the Formula, I share with you my experiences, experiments, and conversations around travel, designing a fulfilling life in whatever form that means for you, and contribution, giving back, those types of things. On this episode, we have a guest coming back from before, Dr. Árpád Rózsás, to discuss how and why he gives feedback. He even provides me a little bit of feedback of his own on some things I'm doing now. So I try to handle it the best that I can, and I wanted to share that experience with you as well. Looking forward to hearing from all of you how this episode impacts you and what takeaways you have. Let's do this thing on the topic of feedback with Dr. Árpád Rózsás. All right, I am back again with Árpád Rózsás, or Dr. Rózsás, as I believe you like to be called. Do you want to give everyone your little 30-second resume before we jump into the topic of basically giving and receiving feedback in the delightful way that you like to give it?
Yes. So my name is Árpád. 30 seconds. So I'm originally from Hungary. Currently, I live in the Netherlands, and I met here in the Netherlands Trevor last year, I believe in November. I'm a civil engineer by training, and last year with a couple of friends we started a company here in the Netherlands with the intention to help humanitarian organizations, like to provide technical assistance. That from my side that didn't go that well, so a few months ago I quit, but currently I'm in the process of finding another organization to join and continue this work. That would be, I think, my 30 seconds.
Yeah, and I feel like you that was like the most humble intro I've heard anyone ever give as I've been talking with them on the podcast. Because you have your doctorate in civil engineering or mathematics, or what is it in?
Yeah, so official civil engineering.
Civil engineering.
Officially, so because there is this official title, but civil engineering is pretty broad. So there's a specialization in structural engineering. And I work at a research and applied research institute in the Netherlands. Yeah.
So you and I mean, we became friends probably about, I don't know, a year ago or so. They can listen to the Kafala episode if they want to hear more about how I buzzed my way into your guys' life. But one of the reason I wanted to talk about this topic with you is because I've been working on this podcast and writing and doing all sorts of different projects for years, and I'm always curious as to like what people's feedback they have are for whatever thing it is that I'm working on. Specifically recently it's been like the podcast and writing, and I remember still the first time I asked you for feedback on the podcast, and you listened, and I remember I asked you and you kind of smiled and I was just like, oh shit. this isn't going to be good. And but then you provided the feedback, and it was in a way that it was really, it was, I don't want to use the word harsh because it wasn't intended to be hurtful, but it was more of just like, here's what you're doing that I don't like. That's not even the right way to say it. Maybe I'll let you pick that up and run with it. How do you, so when you provide feedback in a very specific way, it's helpful, but it's also like very to the point.
Yeah. But I think that was a good, like, one-liner description, what you gave, that it's harsh. And that's something I receive often, and it's not at all my intention. So I try to change it, but I change it only when I feel that the other person wouldn't, it's not a good way to say wouldn't be able to take it, but would be probably affected too much, like emotionally, because the person would take it too personally. But if I in an ideal situation, if someone is not that much affected emotionally by a criticism, because that criticism is not towards the person but towards an act, some sort of a product, what you created, I tend to focus on the parts which can be improved. And I'm not saying that this is a positive thing. And especially since I'm here in the Netherlands, I changed this a bit to start first with the positive ones. But my natural way of giving feedback is basically solely focusing on the negative things. Basically, starting from the assumption that you are probably aware of the positive components and you are probably unaware of the negative ones. Otherwise, you would have changed it for those parts. So, and we all have our blind spots. So I'm just trying to give, hey, in my opinion, based on these and these arguments, I think at these and these points, you could improve. And I'm trying to give it in the most honest way I can give.
Yeah, and it's there's a point that I don't know if I was talking with you or someone else about this, where I brought up the topic of, feedback and whatnot, and it was, is it better to give feedback to someone when they're trying to improve, even though it might hurt their feelings? Or is it better to say, not give them the harsh feedback because it could emotionally hurt them?
Yeah, we might have talked about this. Yeah. My policy on this is I only decide not to give the harsh feedback, which I would say in my case, my sort of honest feedback is that I clearly feel that it would be detrimental for the other person, because then after the second sentence, the person couldn't even listen to what I'm saying. So, yeah. But other than that, for example, hurting a little bit feelings, I don't mind, and I think in many cases, in many situations, that is actually necessary. There are so many people who are delusional. Just to give you an example, that was a really entertaining example this week. So we are constantly looking for good students at the research institute for doing internship, basically joining us in our research projects. And then this guy from TU Delft sent his application, and it was comical that he was claiming that he invented a new device and technology. I will not talk too much about the details, but who knows who will listen to this. But basically, he claimed that it's a world-changing invention. It was an absolutely trivial little thing. So for those people, I believe actually the only way I can imagine that you can have people with such ideas about themselves is that no one has ever told them that, hey, what are you talking about? This is bullshit. Start to work on yourself and try to do something good, and maybe afterwards you can talk about your achievements. So I think in many situations, actually, it's a must-have thing. And additional motivation, I give my criticism in a way how I would like to receive it. I'm generally not interested in appraisals. I'm interested in very on-the-point, concise criticism.
Yeah. Walk me through. So, you and I have had these conversations many times where I've gotten to the point where I kind of have started seeking out harsh feedback because because
you are masochistic. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Somebody else said that to me the other day. They're like, why did you do that thing again? And I was like, I don't know. I thought it'd be fun. They're like, wasn't it painful? I'm like, yeah, a little. So maybe I am. Who knows? But so let's go back to maybe a situation where I or somebody else has come to you specifically for feedback on something, how do you walk through the process of, taking a look at what they want feedback on, processing your thoughts a little bit, and then presenting that information in a way that you'd like to receive it and that, is going to be most helpful for them in the future?
Okay. I think I would suggest to take an example when I gave feedback to you, because it is just much easier to talk about, and I think you are also comfortable with sharing those details. Mm-hmm. If that is good for you. I mean, let's pick just, let's say, the podcast feedbacks we had. I think it's a good sort of overview because there were multiple occasions where you asked for feedback when you made some improvements, changes, and I give my opinion again. Yeah, so the process is basically I just first try to be as clear as possible about what he would like to hear my opinion about. So in that case, it was just the podcast itself, like the content of it. I cannot recall which episode I listened to.
I can tell you.
Okay.
I can tell you exactly which one. It was the one. Yeah. It was the one with the guy on communication within relationships.
Yeah. And this guy was talking about his personal experience with his wife. That was part. Yeah. All right. So. So what I usually do with these kind of things, and I listen to the whole thing first without interruption, and I just wanted to basically formulate first a general global opinion. So I could not listen until the end because it was so bad. But again, from that's always a crucial thing from my perspective. So that's, I think, how I went to you, telling you that, hey, this is solely my opinion. I don't know anything about your target audience and your typical listener. But for me, after a few minutes, it was clear that I would not listen to it. And then I think this was basically after that I listened to certain parts again, because I wanted to be able to refer to particular parts and to be actually 100% sure that my opinion is not based on unfounded arguments. And I think when I went to you, I just told you that, hey, I can give you a feedback on this from my perspective. When would I listen to your podcast, and why would I stop listening to your podcast if all the episodes were like this? And then I think of course I knew you already, so I was expecting you to be able to handle the harsh feedback. I don't know what was your first impression, by the way, when you first heard, when I think very clearly expressed that I didn't like it.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about, I wanted to know why. I don't think I really cared that much that you said you didn't like it. It was more just like, okay, tell me why. Why? That's all I was thinking.
Yeah. I don't know. Did I only tell you, or I also wrote down things?
I think you only told me.
Because that's also something I usually do. I also often make notes. Because when I give it in a written form, I want to be sure that reading the whole thing gives a balanced impression. But after the feedback part, actually, I think that's a crucial component, just to listen to the receiver. And then because you wanted to know, I think we went into a discussion why I think like this. And then I think that led, especially the second time when you asked for my feedback, that led to this discussion I clearly remember about, why are you doing this? And who is your target audience? And what you would like to give to your target audience. And I think it was also interesting that your answer confirmed my feeling that you didn't have a clear answer to these questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. For example, this second one, how did you perceive it when we were talking about what's the reason of giving the podcast or doing the podcast?
Yeah. You're talking about the second time I asked you for feedback?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you sent a new one and you said that you improved it.
Yeah. So how do I say this? I think that I kind of expected harsh feedback again, so I wasn't surprised. But then when you asked, the thing is when you bring up specific points like that, most of the time I'm just like, oh shit, you're right. and then it's kind of my job to figure out what to do from there. So I think when you brought it up and you're like, and you asked a couple of questions and I didn't have a clear answer, and I'm still formatting that a bit. And I think our conversation before this interview started probably sounds a little more, I feel like I'm getting more and more clear on what I'm doing versus before. So I think the second time it was just more like, okay, well, I still have some of the same issues. I feel like that it's still a work in progress, and that, I mean, I feel like I also ask good questions in response though, when you're like, you don't sound like you or authentic or whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like explain to me what that sounds like,
Yeah. So just before you said this, I wanted to tell, for example, that I remember this was one of my biggest problems, that I met you before you lived in our house and we had normal human talks. And when I started to listen to your podcast, I was just, okay, who the fuck is this person? And because you were, I'm not supposed to swear in your podcast.
No,
sorry.
You can swear. Please.
Say
whatever you want.
So for me, but that might be also a European thing or an Eastern European thing. I just cannot stand when people act in a certain way which is not how they are.
Yeah.
And there is this typical, I mean, I don't really listen to podcasts, but this typical, maybe just media personality, when you have a certain way of talking and a certain, even a rhythm of your talk and certain expressions. And I just wanted to tell you, and also to give positive feedback, I'm very pleased with this talk because I feel like we're just having a personal conversation.
Yeah. Well, I'd say, I don't know if you know this or not, but I take most of the feedback that you give me to heart, and I try to, almost all of it, I would say. I'm trying to think of any that I haven't listened to, but I would say that I don't know, I do my best to listen. And I think that if I look back early on, it was a lot of like a self-confidence thing too, where maybe I felt like I had to portray a certain persona because I myself wasn't interesting or good enough or whatever to just be myself. And I've had so much more fun since I've just relaxed and, say whatever the fuck comes to my mind. And it's just, and I think that people that listen enjoy it more. And then people like you that I talk to on here also have, you can relax and kind of say, have like a normal conversation. It's not like it's not like you have to pretend to be something.
Oprah. I don't really know this show. Man, show in. Yeah. And we will see whether your listeners will disappear or not.
Well, I have noticed that since I've started being more of myself that I have gotten less and less listeners. So maybe it's just that I'm not that interesting. I should just pretend to be somebody important again.
Yeah, I mean, but if you do that just to get more listeners and to get more money from advertisements, then I would say that's totally fine. Mm-hmm. Just do it.
No, knowing, if that's my intention, I don't. Yeah. I don't have interest in that though. My interest is more in, can I create something that, like, first of all, I want to enjoy at some level doing it. I don't want it to be torture. And then second, it's, am I proud of what I'm putting out? And I think if I just pretend to be somebody or like put on a persona or a face or whatever, and just to get more advertisers or money, I think it'll just kind of be like a hollow experience.
Yeah.
So we were talking about formulating the feedback. Now you said that, So you said that you kind of consume it, take some time, swallow, force it through your ears, essentially, and then you kind of take the time. Actually, I don't know if you really got into this. How you really formulate the feedback from there after you've kind of consumed everything.
Yeah, I don't think so that there is a general way of describing it. But one thing is, I try to do it topic dependent. If it is not really a personal matter, then I try to do it as rationally as possible. But then if it is something really personal, then it's more on the emotional level. But then most of the times when I'm asked explicitly for feedback, because with friends it's more like, hey, let's meet up, and it's not something like, hey, could you give me feedback on this? So when there is explicitly a request for feedback, that's mostly when there is a rational component involved. And then I think that's it. Just do it as objectively as possible and to give it as clearly as possible without, actually that's again what I said earlier, so without focusing on the particular person, but focusing on the matter, on the content, what you are giving feedback about. But yeah, I'm also thinking about this harshness component. I received this feedback multiple times. I have a colleague in the office who said that I am the last one. She's asking for my opinion on something, but not because she's not interested in my opinion, but she's afraid. So she wants to refine her thoughts. She's much older than me, like a senior researcher, but she wants to refine her thoughts through conversations with other colleagues, and then afterwards she's ready to ask for my opinion. But of course, this requires a lot more effort than to give a shallow feedback just for the sake of pleasing someone. That, hey, I gave to you the safety feedback telling you that you are the greatest person ever on this planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I find that to be frustrating when if I approach someone that I want to hear their opinion or their feedback, or I have a lot of respect for them, I'm like, hey, what did you think? Can you take a look at this and give me some thoughts? And then I get the response, oh man, it was great, dude. It was so good. You're doing great. I'm just like, yeah, that's not helpful at all, And I'm assuming that you all, well, actually I'm curious about this. Do you take a little bit of pleasure in delivering harsh feedback?
Yes, I think so.
I thought so.
Which is funny. Something I should think about it. Why I do fine. Yeah, I think I do.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I mean, that is one sort of obvious but a little bit disturbing way of explaining it, which is like the feeling of maybe superiority, like poking holes in someone's work. However, it's more complicated than that, because if it was solely just that, then I wouldn't give the feedback in a way that it could be used to improve it. because I would just say that, hey, your work is a piece of shit and you will never be able to improve it.
Mm-hmm. I feel like part of it has to be because you actually care about seeing the other person improve or succeed a little bit.
Well, might be, but I'm just thinking, I'm really trying to be critical on myself in this respect, because if that was true, probably I would have listened to your other podcasts to see whether you have improved, but I didn't. I only listened to your podcast when you asked me to listen to something.
Mm-hmm.
But the caring component, I think it's there. But I think that probably the most important or the strongest component is just to say that, hey, this is what I would expect from others to behave towards me like this. And if I expect this for myself, I give this to others as well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, caring is there as well, because there are I have cases where I reach the point where I don't care too much about someone and someone's work because of past experience, and I find it pointless or a waste of time. And in those situations, I really don't give feedback. I just tell, hey, yeah, you are doing great. Just keep up the good work. And that is, in my opinion, not a feedback.
Yeah.
Just
damn.
Yeah.
Does that mean all the people that have told me that don't give a shit about my work anymore?
Yeah. That's how I personally interpret if someone is telling me, hey, you are doing a great job. And especially if someone is telling this who does not even have the competence to judge my work. So I think I cannot imagine another explanation than those people do not really care.
Yeah. That's an interesting way to think about that. Damn.
However, that's something you can answer this better. It might be an American thing.
Yeah. I would say you might be correct on that, though I don't. I think it's tough to figure out who actually is saying that and who cares and who doesn't care. I think that it's hard to say who is saying it because, it's a cultural thing, and who's saying it because they don't care. It's really hard to differentiate, I guess. I mean, plus you have people as well who are going to be more, I don't know, they're going to be more rude or blunt with their feedback, but then it's not helpful. Like I can think of a specific example of someone, I asked them for feedback on something like, yeah, that was shit. And I was like, well, which part? And then they can't really tell you. And you're just like, this is completely useless feedback, So I think that being harsh isn't the key component of the way that you give feedback. It's just, it can be, maybe you make it a little more harsh than maybe somebody else would deliver it that isn't.
That's for my own pleasure.
Yes. What would you be, a sadist then? Or what would that be? Because you enjoy inflicting pain on others.
Sadistic.
Yeah. Cool.
So if you are masochistic, then it's a perfect match.
Yeah, that's why we're such good friends.
Yeah.
I'm really uncomfortable with this friendship now.
Yeah.
All right. So we've talked about, some examples of you giving me feedback, maybe how you do it. I feel like you've said it yourself. You do it from a perspective of how you would like to receive feedback. How is it that, so on the flip side, when somebody gives you harsh feedback or the feedback that you like to give, what do you think is the best way to kind of respond or handle that criticism or feedback?
Yeah. Well, this again, from my perspective, just to express your appreciation, because that, yeah, I like when you said it is a sign of caring. It is going to be always obvious if that feedback, and even if it's harsh, is a thorough one and well thought through. So yeah, I think it might be easier to take it if it is written, because there is no direct confrontation. But I think it's mostly, just take your time and try to understand why that person is writing that thing, and try to analyze whether the person is right or wrong. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then ask questions, because probably you will not see it immediately, as I said in the beginning. If you were aware of all the shortcomings of your work, then you would have changed those things.
One of the things that you make me think of a bit is the ability to kind of detach personally from the feedback, like not to get personally like riled up and be like, well, you're just an asshole. It's more like, okay, well, they're not saying that I'm all these things or the results of this, or, or because you didn't like you didn't like my podcast every time you listen to it, that you think I'm a bad person and that I'm terrible and all that. It's really like, you kind of have to detach personally in order to figure out what those action items are, or like what you can do to improve, I guess.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's why, in my case, I know that I should often change how I give feedback, because actually I know that this is really difficult for many people to detach. And I know that for me it's pretty easy, and this is how I always looked at my things or others' work or actions. So it's a good advice, but I think it's a difficult thing if it doesn't come naturally to make this detachment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially
did you learn this, by the way? Or was it natural for you?
I think I had to learn it over time, because I remember back in, first business when I was like in my early 20s. It probably started before that, like when I was an online poker player, and I had a coach that was in Germany, and we would go through like my old hand history and stuff, and do like the, probability calculations of the different actions I took. And, I would get kind of like, I used to get irritated or like, yeah. So I remember him giving me like kind of not harsh feedback, but he was just like, why did you do this here? Like kind of questioning my decision making and my logic. And usually I only got upset when I couldn't justify my decisions. And then, with like the first few businesses I was involved in, that were definitely not extremely successful by any means. I do remember getting feedback early on in those and taking it personally, getting upset. But that was never, I don't feel like it was never because I had the answer and I was upset. It was more like, how do I put this? It was like the feedback I was getting was like I didn't necessarily, I tended to actually agree with the feedback, but I took it personally because, I had all these excuses for why I wasn't doing it. Maybe it was stuff I already knew I should be doing, but I couldn't justify why I hadn't done it yet.
Yeah.
So,
those cases can be definitely painful, because then that's already something you are hiding or postponing. You don't want to face it, and someone is just smashing it into your head or face and saying, yeah, thank you for reminding me that I'm an incapable human being.
Yeah. I think those experiences, though, kind of taught me that whenever those things got brought up, they were things that I needed to deal with or handle. So instead of responding to them, and maybe that's just come with age and experience, but it's being able to take a step back and looking at it and thinking like, okay, well, if this is true, what do I need to do about it? So, you know, I really think that it's probably really difficult to do unless you've just been in these situations a lot of times and you're able to kind of acknowledge that this isn't like a red flag or a bad thing. It's just something that you need to take care of or do.
Yeah. Well, I would say it can be a bad thing, but I think that's for me, actually, that's one of the main motivations, that actually if it is a bad thing or I'm doing something incorrectly, that I want to be notified as soon as possible. So I appreciate if someone is drawing my attention. It's going to be, especially if you messed up something and you thought that you did it correctly, but it's not. Yeah, it's going to be shameful in the beginning because, oh yeah, I was not good enough to do it correctly, or I messed it up. However, if you look at it from a perspective, but now I have the opportunity to do it better, rather than keep going on with the incorrect way of doing it. And now an interesting point popped into my mind, because we only talked about cases, I think, when feedback was asked. But there is this interesting part when it's not asked for, but you have something to say because you notice something, or you care, or you just want to help the person, and when to take the step to give voice to your opinion when it's not asked for.
Yeah, when do you decide if it's right to give somebody feedback or not?
Yeah. For example, in the middle of a podcast. So when I was thinking about this, I was just thinking whether I could give to you some feedback which would be new to you as a nice experience if you are up for it.
Wow. Yeah, why not?
You can say no.
No, let's do it.
Okay. So unsolicited.
Unsolicited advice.
Unsolicited advice, chapter 1. And this is interesting. This is not forced at all, because actually I was thinking about this aspect in the past regarding you, and I wanted to talk about this. But when you were here the last time, this kind of behavior didn't happen. So it's related to one thing I noticed, that you tend to, for me, you tend to align too quickly and too easily with certain ideas and suggestions. So just to give you an example, so in the past, for me, this is how I sort of met you and experienced your podcast. For me, that was like something like how I imagine these canned, typical podcasts, and which are the products of how to do and self-development books. And then I started to give you feedback. I recommended you books to read, and I was I was first very happy that you were seriously considering those things when I mentioned. But then at a certain point, I was actually afraid that you were taking too seriously my suggestions and you were not questioning them. For example, whether it's good for you. And I started to feel a little bit that you start to become almost like a follower
of the Árpád cult.
Yes, of the cult. I don't know whether you have ever received such a feedback on this, or you are aware of this, or what do you think?
Yes, so I have received that feedback before, actually a lot before I started, before the last year especially, and I would say that it's accurate and fair feedback, that Yeah, I mean, I kind of would put, uh,
Sorry
trying to think of
for putting
what's,
you into this situation.
what's that?
I'm just sorry for putting you into this situation in the middle
No,
of a recording.
no,
It was
I don't,
intentional, so no, sorry. Yeah.
sorry, not sorry. No, I really don't mind at all. I actually enjoy, talking about stuff like this. I am a masochist. Shit. So I did get this feedback from a really good friend of mine that, I would say he's like another person I go to for harsh advice or harsh criticism on different things, and he's usually very pointed and very, very action oriented on these things, but he doesn't pull punches. And he kind of said like that I basically kind of put people up on pedestals, and I'm not gonna. The way he said it is sometimes I just get my head up some of these other people's asses and just kind of am following everything that they're saying without really questioning it, and just because for some reason, and probably had a lot to do with my own insecurities and not really knowing, like having my own or life experiences, own like values. I'm not even really sure. Just yeah, and so I think that I carried that with me for a bit. And did you say you didn't see it the last time I was there?
Yeah, it was not so explicit. I think it just didn't surface. I mean, there were these parts when you said, "Oh, I'm going to read that," and I read that book, what you recommended, and then this other one, and now I look back at how I did my podcasts, and now I do it differently, and I just felt a little bit of. I hope that it's not like going towards something which would be like almost like a bigot following of certain ideas.
No. I understand what you're saying, and I mean, there's I think that it's definitely something that it's feedback that I've gotten before, and it's something that I don't even know if I've consciously worked on it or thought about it. It's just more that I think that I think it's easier or maybe in the past, it was easier for me to pick up other people's, ideas, beliefs, values, whatever it was, and just kind of run with those instead of having my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like because I don't know, it made me very uncomfortable in the past to to be like, well, this is what I believe in. This is what what I like, what I don't like. And I think I'm much more comfortable with that now. But I'm curious to hear if you, I don't know. I'm curious if I'm still exhibiting that type of behavior or not. And maybe it's just in a different way where I get kind of fixated on a specific topic or thing and kind of consume myself with it for a period of time until I move on to something else.
Yeah. But there is a pattern to move on to the next one. I'm not sure about that, but yeah, I experienced this. I mean, because when the first time we met, I had the feeling that you were pretty much into these self-development books.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is just how I imagine them based on reading a few blog posts. That is, for me, is a very shallow of treatment of things in life.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we started to talk about things, then certain topics came to the focus, like climate change and what to do, how to live your life in a way that it will not lead to the destruction of the planet, or just doing something good. And for example, the second time when you visited us in the Netherlands and you mentioned that, hey, you are thinking about starting an NGO. Mm-hmm. That was something positive. And mm-hmm. the first time, but when I asked why and what would be the purpose, then you didn't have an answer. And then for me, that was also something like, okay, then what is happening here? What's the motivation? This sounds like that in your worldview, you put a positive value to having an NGO, but it doesn't matter what that NGO is doing. Mm-hmm. But so then you didn't think about it further. Just basically just having an NGO. But it was also during that discussion we had. It also you mentioned that you are thinking about doing a PhD.
Yeah.
And in that case, you gave an explanation, but that was absolutely ridiculous. You should never ever do it for that reason, which was something like that. It looks good that it's next to your name on the cover of your book.
Yeah, that was. I'm glad we're bringing that up again.
You're welcome. And because at least that showed a little bit something else that you started to think about. Different directions. However, I still felt that this was more of a facade. Mm-hmm. That there was no like coherent, like solid structure behind it, where all the things are connected, and you made the decision that, hey, I'm working towards this because of this. And interestingly, I don't think so that there is even a single human being who has this sort of solid structure completed, but it's, I think, totally fine to say, I don't have answers to certain questions. I mm-hmm. don't need to pick up something and follow it and force myself to follow it just mm-hmm. because I don't have answers to certain things. I mean, this is something, I think, how people become religious if they didn't born into a religious family, that they are just uncomfortable with unanswered questions.
Yeah, I think that let me rephrase that. One of the things that I feel like I mean, if I'm just talking from my point of reference for the last year or whatnot. And I would say that one of the things I feel, one of the things that I feel like has kind of happened is like I feel much more comfortable without having any answers. I had this conversation with somebody earlier today, actually, a former student, and I was just talking with him, about like NGOs and startups and whatnot. And I think the point that I made was like, one thing I would like to do better moving forward is, instead of just like having a startup idea or startup or NGO or whatever, instead of like starting from there, like actually have something that I care about enough to work on, whether that's, I mean, I don't even have to do any of those things really. It's just more that, is there something that exists in NGO space, like a problem or something like that I care enough about? Or am I just doing it because I want to fulfill the role of being somebody who works in that sector,
Yeah.
And I think that I think your feedback is pretty accurate, where maybe in the past, I mean, still probably struggle with this today. Just getting to the point where, instead of being like, well, I'm a startup person, or I'm a traveler or whatever, doing something more specific for reasons other than like fulfilling that role, or I guess you called it like a facade.
Yeah. And do you have an answer? Or because I understood it a bit like that you would need like a core reason or value or motivation which would actually lead to, let's say, start an NGO, start a startup, obtain a degree.
Yeah.
And those would be just actually steps on the road and tools towards achieving something.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that you have the core motivation or motivations?
I mean, I would say that I don't have the specific, like, I want to work with refugee children from this community to do this, but it's more that, I don't know. I would say that the answer is no, that I don't have that, but I would say I'm much closer than I have been, so it's kind of, I feel like I'm on the path of like where I want to, I don't know. I just would like to do, I mean, we've talked about this, where I want to do more in like giving back and contributing, other than just like selling stuff online and having like an e-commerce store and whatnot. I would like to have more of an impact than that. Now, the specific impact I want to have, I don't know. And that's kind of why I've taken my agency business down the path of working with humanitarian projects and NGOs and whatnot, and like going towards that direction. Because I don't have the answer right now, but I feel like that's much closer to me like lining things up from like a value standpoint and a career standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Oh, but then I find it perfectly believable and genuine answer, because this whole process, I mean, it was the same for me with our company. It started just a way, hey, we don't know about this sector, we don't know what is possible, but we are going to try it and explore it and adjust our strategy, and we will quit if it turns out to be that it's completely different than how we imagined. So often it's just an exploration, what is there. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. No, I have a question for you in regards to your unsolicited feedback.
Yes.
What, I mean, one of the things that one of our earlier conversations was, you said you had some, you kind of are able to identify how like people's, what do you call it, like their standard operating procedure. No, that's not the right thing. But you said their basic, like, how they operate as a person. I'm butchering what you said. What did fill in the blank for me?
I'm not 100% sure that I know what you mean, but just give me an example, maybe.
Yeah, so I was asking you, like, okay, well, all right, smartass, you understand how people work so well. Like, all right, how do I work? And then you were just like, oh, and then the answer you gave was I don't remember what the second one was, because you said a couple things, and one was like, you said something like, oh, sorry, what?
No, was it in the attic?
Yeah. We were in the attic. Yeah. That sounds weird, but we were in the attic chilling. Yeah, you said something along the lines of like, "Tell me, Trevor, does everyone deserve to be loved?" And I was like, "Well, of course, Árpád. What kind of question is that?" And then you're like,
"Yes.
Then why don't you?" And I was like, "Oh shit."
Yes.
So.
Yeah, I remember. And then, sorry, could you? Now we are on the same page. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah. I don't think I've even gotten to the question yet.
Okay.
I just wanted to fill in the gap. So the question is, right. So the Netherlands was like the second country I went to on my travels, and I don't know how many I went to after that. It was a bunch, but she saw me kind of at the very beginning when I was still, I don't know, I'm constantly going to be figuring things out, I feel like, but I feel like that I was much more green then, and I had a lot less perspective on things. And I feel like I've changed quite a bit from then. It's hard to say for sure from like a first person perspective, but from the advice that you gave, plus you've seen kind of where I started, where I'm at now. And let's just assume that there's probably still that gap that I need to fulfill. This kind of goes back to a conversation that we had before with like you drew a graph. It was like a 3D graph that you couldn't quite put together on the whiteboard. But, so taking your advice into consideration, what is your advice for how to maybe develop I don't know what the right term would be, develop that stronger core set of values or something like that. Do you know what I'm trying to ask?
That's one thing for sure. This is the longest question I ever live.
All right, let me phrase it into one question. All right, I've heard your feedback. You've seen where I started and where I'm at now. How would you recommend I move forward in taking your feedback and putting it into some action items? There, that's the question.
Yeah, so how you formulated the question sounded a bit like what I said I'm afraid of.
Damn it.
So, in light of that, I would just say that I would recommend to try to take, although it sounds like almost like a very strange and like a recommendation, but to take your life more into your hand and be in control. And I mean it in a way that asking me, what would you recommend me? What should be the next step? It sounds a little bit like, you are lost or you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
For me, it would sound a little more reasonable if you would say, this is my plan. This is what I want to achieve. And do you think that this is reasonable or do you think that I will succeed in this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I was asking more from the perspective of people who are listening and maybe they've seen the same, they feel like maybe they've exhibited some of the same behaviors in their life. So I feel like I have a plan, but I was asking more for the benefits of everyone listening. And then I also wanted to compare your notes to what my plan was.
Yeah. So of course I cannot give a concrete recommendation to unknown people what to do with their lives, but I can give recommendation based on what I find very valuable or found very valuable so far in terms of how to find your path, which is just the following, that in my opinion, or I'm not aware of anything else rather than rational thinking and reasoning, which can give you a solid foundation based on which or standing on which you can go against millions of people, because then in that case you would know that 1 + 1 is not 3, and you could trust your reason. If you base your actions and goals and just goals on things you cannot fully convince yourself that those things are true, you just accept it because someone said it, a charismatic person or a religious leader, then at a certain point you will give up on those things, and you won't have a clear guidance. That's my experience, that if you are critical about what you do, then it's going to be only reason and rationality which can guide you. It's very important, can guide you, but it will not give you final goals. The goals should be set based on something else that's subjective and based on yourself and your personal desires, but how to achieve those things and what to decide what should be the next step. That should be based on, in my opinion, that cannot be based on anything else, but basically just reason. Otherwise, you are risking of basically potentially wasting your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Now I'm thinking about the like the implications of your feedback, because it's I mean, yeah, me and anybody else who's listening that can relate to that, not criticism but feedback. I think that it's, you might what's funny is you can kind of get caught in this, or at least me, I can get caught in this trap where I feel like I'm taking control, I'm doing things, I'm putting an action items into place, and then I find myself around like a completely different set of people, and I find myself influenced by that environment or those people and whatnot. Not as much now as I used to be in the past, but it's, I don't know how, it's interesting because it's, when you're in a specific environment and you feel like you're making these choices for yourself, or you're taking your life into your hands or taking control, it's, I don't know, how do you, I mean, I'm asking myself and you this question, is like, how do you tell if you're the one taking control, or if it's just you kind of adapting again to the circumstances and environment that you're around?
Yeah, I think the same answer I gave earlier. You will, in my opinion, you will never be able to find any satisfactory, like truly satisfactory answer to this question unless you are basing it on facts and rational thinking. The problem is that it's not enough to answer all the questions, but it can be a good guidance. So your particular question, if I understood it correctly, whether your actions, desires, and aspirations are yours or products of the environment and society, it can be tested in a way that, hey, what are the typical desires and aspirations in this community or in the community where I grew up, and to compare it with another community on the other side of the globe, and to think, what are the chances that actually in Iowa it just happened to be that everyone is aspiring to have a huge house and a big-titted wife.
Jesus Christ.
Sorry, Eric had his influence on me.
I see that, yeah.
So I think you should not expect that, for example, rational thinking and factual arguments would give you clear-cut answers, but it can help you actually in a lot of questions to give you, for example, if you think that your life should be oriented towards like collecting as much money as possible, then I can tell you for sure that is not your personal desire. It's inside of each human being, but it's probably not the part of yourself which you would like to embrace, and it's not something which you would like to build your life upon. However, Western Europe and Northern America is pretty much centered around just wealth and material things. So I think, again, just to put it short, just reason which can help you in this. Yeah. And understand. Yeah. Again, reason and understanding, and it's not about scientific facts. It can be something like related to soft sciences. I think one of the most important lessons everyone should learn in school is things related to sociology and psychology, to understand the mechanisms, how we are being constantly influenced by environmental factors, by our peers. And once you know about, for example, peer pressure, or about this famous experiment when people were saying that the shorter stick was the longer because everyone else in the room was an inside person, and they were saying that, yeah, of course, the shorter one is the longer. If you are unaware of these things, then in real life, when you will be subjected to these forces, you are just not prepared.
Yeah. Can the opposite happen where, you find yourself being influenced in these ways and you just, because I'm thinking of some examples from myself growing up or in my 20s where I felt like everyone was going one way and then I maybe purposefully went the other way.
Yeah. And then, sorry, what is the question?
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's possible that that's also an product of the environment, where
to go to do something else than the community.
Yeah. Like you notice that everyone's kind of going one way, but you find that you're drawn to go the other.
Yeah, it can be, and it can be also a product of, I mean, in a shallow way, that's, I think, nowadays pretty prevalent to try to at least think about yourself that you are a unique human being, while your uniqueness is exactly the same as the uniqueness of 1 million other people's uniqueness. Mm-hmm. I can imagine that a community could, or the society could value and foster that kind of attitude that you are just going contrary to everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm saying what I'm advocating is not to go against things
mm-hmm.
by definition, but just to cultivate your reasoning and the ability to be able to stand on your own feet and not to get your goals and desires from holy books, including
mm-hmm.
Bibles and self-development books, but to be able to make your own judgment and your own decisions.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm really thinking of the only way I know how to do that is to just like, I'm fairly certain that we had this conversation at one point in time too, is just actually going out and like participating, in like the your community or the the world as a whole, I guess, like participating in different causes or something, you know what I mean? Like actually having life experience to build that foundation on.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say that that's the only way. So I would say that it's a combination. So one is experiencing things, and the other one, often it's enough to collect the information and just to think about things. I mean, I don't have to go to the United States to understand that your health care is outrageous.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, if I was there and I experienced it, I would potentially draw similar conclusions, but life is too short to try to understand everything based on your experience and not to learn from other people who actually already potentially experienced or worked out certain things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you on that. Yeah, definitely there's not enough time to explore all these different things. Well, we've kind of gone all over the place from feedback to giving me feedback to basically like life advice in general. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave the audience with or include in the episode that started about feedback but turned into life advice and kind of formulating your own, like taking your life in your hands, formulating your own path, opinions, values, and those types of things?
Yeah, maybe one thing which is like connecting back to one of the first concepts we talked about is You said it, and it's more feedback is some sort of a caring. I think it's important to keep in mind, and maybe just to contemplate, to think a little bit about when was the last time you received or you gave such a feedback where you felt that was genuine and meaningful, not something just shallow.
Mm-hmm.
And if you find that the number is too low, I would suggest to start doing it. And my experience is that by giving real, genuine feedback, actually people will start to ask you again because they know the value of it, and they will also give feedback to you. So it can have this positive impact, and it can start things to happen.
Well, folks, that's a wrap for this week's show. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. I really appreciate you taking the time to stop by again. Now, if you have an extra couple minutes, please open up your podcast application and leave us a review. As I said probably a few times, reviews help people like you find us and listen to our show. It also helps us keep going and really know what you guys think, if we're doing a good job, what we can work on, how we can improve. So feel free to leave us a review or drop me a line, Trevor@theformulapodcast.com, to let me hear your thoughts. That's a wrap for this week, and I look forward to you guys stopping by next time.